Amina's parents died, and the elders said marriage was her duty before she even finished grieving. They thought forcing her into a stranger's arms would end her choices forever. They had no idea that the quiet fisherman they chose would become the one thing that exposed every hidden greed in the village. And what Amina's own uncle tried to do next would shake the compound to its roots. But Karma had already started walking toward the courtyard, soft-footed, patient, and exact. Amina noticed the tension in the air before anyone spoke it aloud, not because she was dramatic, but because grief had trained her to listen. The birds outside sang as usual, the morning sun warmed the clay wall as it always did, yet the compound felt like it was holding its breath. She sat on a low stool, her back against the sunlit clay, gently rocking her little brother, Usman, against her chest. His small fingers gripped the edge of her wrapper, like it was the only safe thing left in the world. Amina's arms ached from carrying him since dawn, but she didn't loosen her hold. If she let go of anything, she feared it would all fall apart. Inside the courtyard, voices murmured. Men's voices, older voices, voices that rarely cared how a girl's heart sounded when it broke. Amina's mind drifted to the day her mother's fever refused to leave, to her father's cough that grew heavier until it became silence. The village had offered condolences then, yes, but condolences did not plant food. Condolences did not stop whispers, and condolences did not protect a girl with land and no parents. A shadow crossed the doorway. Amina looked up and saw her uncle Adam standing there, arms folded, watching her like she was a decision waiting to be signed. His face held a tight patience that wasn't kindness, it was calculation. "She is still outside?" he asked someone inside, as if Amina couldn't hear. Amina's throat tightened. Adam had been helpful at first, so helpful that even his help felt like a rope. He counted her father's goats, checked the boundaries of her parents' land, spoke to men she didn't know, and always ended with the same words. "You are young. You need guidance. Guidance." Amina had learned that word could be a disguise, too. A hand touched her shoulder. It was Zuri, breathless from running, eyes wide with worry. "They called all the elders," Zuri whispered, "even Chief Obi." Amina's heart thudded once, hard. Chief Obi was not summoned for small matters. When he spoke, lives shifted. From inside, a staff struck the ground. One clean knock. Silence followed, heavy and final. Then Chief Obi's voice came, calm as if calmness made choices less cruel. "Bring the girl." Amina drew in a shaky breath and kissed Usman's head. She stood, holding him close, and stepped toward the courtyard where the men waited. And as she crossed that threshold, the village called it tradition. But tradition, the narrator observes, has a way of protecting the powerful first. Amina entered the courtyard with Usman pressed to her chest, and the elders' eyes followed her like judges watching a case they had already decided. The morning light fell kindly on the clay floor, but nothing about the moment felt kind. The women at the edges of the gathering stood quiet, hands folded, as if silence could keep them safe from being next. Chief Obi sat on a carved stool at the center, his gray beard resting against his chest, his staff planted firmly beside his foot. He did not look angry. That was what made it worse. Anger could be argued with. Calm certainty was a locked door. "Amina," he began, and his voice carried the weight of long-held customs. "You have endured sorrow. You have carried your brother well. The village has seen your strength." The narrator notes, with bitter honesty, that praise is often the first sweet covering laid over a bitter command. Amina swallowed. Compliments had never fed Usman. Compliments had never brought her parents back. Chief Obi continued, "Your late father made a promise while he lived, a promise to bind your household to another, and now that he has joined the ancestors, That promise must be fulfilled. A murmur ran through the courtyard. Amina felt it more than she heard it, like wind brushing through dry leaves. Chief Obi lifted his chin. You will be wed to Kofi, the fisherman. Amina's breath caught. The words landed like a stone in her stomach. She had heard the name only in passing. A quiet man, recently arrived. A stranger who kept to the river and spoke little. A man with no family roots in the compound. No history she knew. No face that lived in her memories. How did a promise made years ago become a chain around her neck now? She looked instinctively toward her uncle Adam. He stood behind two elders, his expression carefully arranged, sympathy shaped like a mask. But his eyes were too bright, too eager, like a man watching a door he had been trying to unlock finally swing open. Amina's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Chief Obi, I respect the elders. I respect my father's name. But I do not know this man. A few heads shifted. A few women glanced at the ground as if ashamed, not of Amina, but of the truth she dared to speak. I have never spoken to him, Amina continued, her fingers tightening around Usman. How can I be given away like property? The narrator does not hide the injustice. Amina's question was reasonable. The silence that answered it was not. Chief Obi's gaze softened, but softness did not change his decision. Child, a family does not live by feelings alone. A promise is a promise. Your mother, may her spirit rest, spoke before she died. She said the household must remain protected and the old agreement must stand. At that, Adam stepped forward, careful not to appear too pleased. Amina, he said, voice smooth, this is for your good. A husband will shield you. The land will be safe under proper hands. You will not struggle alone. Proper hands. Amina's stomach turned because she heard what he didn't say. Under my supervision. Under my control. Zuri, standing at the edge of the courtyard, took one step forward before an older woman grabbed her wrist and pulled her back. The warning was silent but sharp. Don't challenge men who decide futures. Amina's eyes burned. She looked at the elders, men who had watched her grow, men who had eaten food from her mother's pot, men who now acted as if her life was a ledger entry. She wanted to scream, but Usman's cheek was warm against her collarbone, trusting and unaware. She could not afford to break in front of him. Chief Obi struck his staff once against the ground. The wedding will be at sunrise tomorrow by the river. Prepare yourself. Just like that, the matter was closed, and as the elders rose, the narrator observes, the courtyard did not feel like a place of wisdom. It felt like a place where a young girl's duty was used to decorate someone else's greed. By dawn, the village had turned Amina's fear into a ceremony. The women moved through the compound as if everything was normal, sweeping, humming, tying bundles, lifting clay pots of palm wine onto their heads. Drummers tested their skins, tapping out rhythms that sounded festive to everyone except the girl at the center of it all. Amina stood near the doorway of her hut, while Zuri tightened the simple ribbon in her hair. It's not fair, Zuri whispered, fingers trembling as she adjusted the knot. You're not a goat to be traded. Amina forced her lips into something that almost resembled a smile. If I cry now, they will call me ungrateful, she said softly. If I shout, they will call me disrespectful. Her eyes flicked toward the courtyard where her uncle Adem watched the preparations like a man admiring a harvest. So I will be quiet. The narrator's voice is gentle but firm. Silence is not always acceptance. Sometimes it is survival. Usman was left with a neighbor woman for the morning, and Amina's arms felt strangely empty without his weight. She followed the procession down the path toward the river, bare feet pressing into cool earth, heart pressing into colder uncertainty. The air smelled of wet soil and smoke from distant cooking fires. Birds circled above, unaware that a life was being rearranged below. At the riverbank, Kofi stood waiting beside his small fishing hut. He was tall, shoulders relaxed, his linen shirt faded from sun and water. He did not stand like a man expecting a prize. He stood like a man bracing himself to be judged. When Amina first saw him, she searched his face for arrogance, for triumph, for the cruel confidence she had seen in men who enjoyed being chosen. But Kofi's eyes were calm, almost sad, like he understood that her presence there was not a gift. He bowed respectfully to the elders as they arrived. "Chief Obi," he greeted, voice steady. Chief Obi nodded as if he were approving the weather. "Today a promise is fulfilled," he announced. The crowd gathered in a half-circle, whispering and craning for a better view. Some women looked at Amina with pity. Some men looked at her with the casual satisfaction of a decision made without them. And then Amara, the old matron, whose mouth never seemed to tire, stepped forward, squinting at Kofi as if searching for something to mock. "This bridegroom looks like a pauper," Amara said loudly, letting her words slap the air. "Hardly a match for our beauty." A ripple of laughter moved through a few villagers. Not many, just enough to make the insult sting. Amina's chest tightened. She glanced at Kofi. His head dipped slightly, not in shame, but in restraint. A man could fight with fists. It took a different strength to swallow humiliation and remain gentle. The narrator's tone sharpens. It is easy to laugh at humble clothes. It is harder to laugh at humble character, because character has a way of outlasting noise. Chief Obi raised his hand for silence. "If anyone objects, speak now." No one did. Of course not. Those who mocked were not brave enough to challenge tradition. Those who pitied Amina were not powerful enough, and those who benefited, like Adem, had no reason to stop what they had helped arrange. The rites began. Amina held a calabash and poured river water into Kofi's cupped hands. Her own hands shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of being watched. Kofi tied a black cord around her wrist, the knot firm but careful, as if he feared hurting her even by accident. "I will cherish you," Kofi said, voice low enough that only she could truly hear. Amina stared at the cord, feeling the finality of it. Her voice came out thin. "I will do my duty." The elders nodded. The drummers began again. Women ululated. The village clapped. And then Kofi turned to her, offering not a grip, not a command, but an open hand. Amina placed her palm in his, and the narrator observes the strange twist of fate. Sometimes the chain is placed on the wrong wrist, and sometimes the person holding it is not the enemy everyone expected. Kofi led Amina away from the riverbank with a slow, respectful pace, as if he understood that every step was heavy for her. The drumming faded behind them, replaced by the steady hush of water and the soft rustle of reeds. Amina kept her eyes forward, refusing to look back at the crowd that had just decided her life could be wrapped up in rhythm and clapping. The hut sat close to the river, small and plain, its clay walls smoothed by careful hands. There was no grand doorway, no painted symbols of wealth, no courtyard of servants waiting to bow. Only a fishing net hanging neatly, a clay stove near the corner, and a low wooden stool that looked worn but loved. Amina's throat tightened. So this is it, she thought. This is the place they brought me to. Kofi set down the small bundle he carried and turned to her. "You can sit," he said gently, pointing to the stool. "You must be tired." The narrator lingers on the detail. Many men who are given a wife act like they have received a trophy. Kofi spoke as though he had received a responsibility. Amina sat slowly, her fingers brushing the black cord around her wrist. The knot felt tighter now, not because it had changed, but because the noise of the village was gone. Without the crowd, the truth stood louder. Kofi moved to the clay stove and stirred a pot, as if cooking could soften the edges of an arranged future. He set smoked fish and yucca on a small wooden tray and placed it carefully in front of her. "You should eat," he said. "You've been awake since before the sun." Amina stared at the food, unsure whether to accept kindness from a man she did not choose. Her pride wanted to stay hard. Her hunger and the ache in her chest wanted something warm to hold on to. "I'm not used to being served," she admitted quietly. Kofi gave a small smile, not mocking, not proud. "Then let it be new," he said. "Not everything new has to be cruel." Amina's eyes flicked to his face. He didn't look at her the way Adam looked at land, like ownership. Kofi looked at her like a person who had been hurt. She took a small bite. The fish was salty and smoky. The yucca was soft. The simple meal settled into her stomach like a quiet promise that she would not be starved here. At least, not of food. Outside, evening crawled across the river, turning the water into a ribbon of fading gold. Amina heard distant laughter from other huts and felt the sting of being separated from everything familiar. Kofi sat across from her, hands resting on his knees. He waited until she finished chewing before speaking again. "I know you didn't ask for this," he said. The words startled her. Most men would avoid that truth, because admitting it would make them guilty. Kofi said it plainly, as if honesty mattered more than comfort. Amina's voice was brittle. "Then why did you agree?" Kofi's gaze held hers. "Because I also know what it is to be alone," he said softly. "My parents died when I was younger. I learned early that life can push people into corners they didn't choose." He paused, then added, "But I won't make your corner smaller." Amina's chest tightened in a different way. Less fear, more confusion. She had prepared herself for a harsh husband. She had not prepared herself for a gentle one. Before she could answer, footsteps approached outside. Amina tensed instantly, her body remembering Adam's watchful eyes. Kofi rose and stepped toward the doorway. A shadow crossed the entrance, and a familiar voice followed. "Amina!" Zuri called, breathless and urgent. "Are you inside?" Amina hurried to the door. When she saw Zuri standing there, eyes bright with worry, she almost collapsed into her arms. Zuri whispered, quick and fierce, "I came to make sure you're safe. And Amina, listen, your uncle is smiling too much. He's celebrating like he won something." The narrator's voice lowers, warning like distant thunder. "When greedy people smile, it is rarely because they are happy for you." Amina looked back at Kofi, who stood quietly behind her, and for the first time since the elder's decision, she felt a thin thread of something unfamiliar. Not joy, not peace, but the smallest beginning of hope. A week passed, and the village decided that time should erase everything. They spoke of Amina's wedding as if it had been a normal celebration. They returned to their routines, returned to gossip, returned to measuring one another's worth by what could be seen, counted, or envied. Only Amina knew that the black cord on her wrist had not loosened, because the memory of being chosen without consent does not fade simply because the sun keeps rising. Still, something unexpected had happened inside Kofi's small hut. Kofi did not command her. He did not raise his voice. He did not treat her grief like an inconvenience. He asked before he touched anything that belonged to her. He listened when she spoke about her parents. At night, when she woke from dreams where fever returned and her mother's voice called from darkness, Kofi would simply sit up and place a cup of water beside her, saying nothing that would cheapen her pain. The narrator observes, with quiet certainty, that kindness is not loud, yet it changes the air in a room. On market day, Kofi rose before dawn and prepared his canoe. He stacked sacks of fish neatly, tying them with careful knots. Amina followed with clay mugs for water and a small woven basket of smoked pieces to trade. The sky was pale, the earth damp, and the path toward the market buzzed with early footsteps. As they neared the stalls, Amina saw people turn their heads. Some stared with curiosity, others with judgment that hadn't even bothered to hide. Amara sat beneath the shade of a palm, surrounded by women who lived on other people's stories. The moment she spotted Amina and Kofi, her mouth curved into the kind of smile that did not come from joy. "Amina!" Amara shouted, loud enough to pull attention like a net. "Come and show us your husband." The women around her laughed before she even finished speaking, as if cruelty was a game they had practiced. Kofi kept walking, shoulders steady. Amina's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin. She had survived loss. She could survive mockery. Amara stood up, pretending to examine Kofi like he was an item at a stall. "So this is the fisherman," she said, clicking her tongue. "Still smelling like river water, still selling fish for trade. Tell me, Amina, did they marry you to him because they couldn't find a proper man?" A few men nearby chuckled. Some women covered their mouths, not to stop laughter, but to hide their enjoyment. Amina's fingers tightened around the basket. She wanted to speak, to defend him, to defend herself. But the village had trained girls to swallow their anger until it turned into sickness. Kofi glanced at her, not pleading, not ashamed, just calm. Then he leaned slightly toward her and said, almost gently, "Let's finish our day." The narrator's voice sharpens. It is a special kind of cowardice to mock someone for honest work, yet praise thieves who wear fine cloth. Amina stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremble in her chest. "Amara," she said, "a man who works is not a man to laugh at." The laughter faltered for a heartbeat. Then Amara scoffed. "Work is one thing, worth is another." Amina's mouth went dry, because she understood what Amara really meant. Worth is what people can envy. They moved past the palm shade and into the market's noise. But even as Amina tried to focus on trading, she felt eyes following them like stones. From across the stalls, Adam watched too. He stood near the grain sellers, pretending to inspect yams while his gaze stayed fixed on Amina's wrist and the invisible line it represented: land, inheritance, control. He had expected Amina to look broken by now. He had expected Kofi to be weak, but seeing them walk side by side, quietly steady, made something sour rise in his chest. Adam's lips tightened. The narrator notes that greed becomes most dangerous when it realizes it may not win. As the sun lowered, Amina and Kofi left the market, their goods traded, their hands full, their hearts heavier than the basket, and behind them, Adam followed at a distance, silent, determined and hungry for more than land. The path from the market narrowed as it led toward the fields, where tall grasses bent under the evening breeze. The sun hung low, spilling warm light across the waterlogged ground, turning puddles into mirrors. Amina walked beside Kofi, her basket lighter now, yet her chest felt weighed down by every laugh Amara had thrown at them. Kofi slowed near the edge of a quiet field, where the river's sound softened into a distant hush. He set the remaining bundle down gently, as if even his tiredness had manners. Then he looked at Amina with an expression she couldn't read, part hesitation, part resolve. "Amina," he said, and the way he said her name made her stop. She turned to him. "What is it?" Kofi's hand moved to his chest. He reached beneath his shirt and drew out a round wooden locket on a cord, worn smooth from being held too often. The sunset caught its surface, making it glow like polished earth. "I've kept something from you," he said quietly. "Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I needed to know what was true. Amina's stomach tightened. For a heartbeat, fear returned, sharp and familiar. Secrets had taken her parents. Secrets had made elders speak over her head. Secrets were rarely kind. Kofi lifted the locket, his fingers steady. "Put your hand here," he said softly. Amina hesitated, then placed her hand over the locket. It was warm from his skin. She felt the faint outline of a carved hinge. Kofi opened it. Inside, folded carefully, was a small map and a charcoal sketch of a large house, wide, solid, and unmistakably built for comfort. Amina stared, breath caught in her throat. "What is this?" she whispered. Kofi exhaled slowly, as if he had been carrying this truth the way Amina carried grief. "Before I came here," he began, "my father was not a fisherman. He owned land beyond these forests, and his work fed many people. When he died, he left everything to me." Amina's eyes widened. The words did not fit the image of the humble man who mended nets and walked dusty paths. She wanted to reject it, to call it impossible. But Kofi's voice held no pride, only clarity. "I could have stayed where it was easy," he continued. "I could have lived in comfort and never known hunger, never known mockery." His gaze lifted to hers. "But I learned something early. People love what you have before they love who you are. So I came here quietly. I worked with my hands. I listened. I watched. I wanted to find a place where my name didn't enter before I did." Amina's throat trembled. "So, you let them insult you?" she said, not accusing, just stunned. Kofi nodded once. "I let them show me who they were." Amina's mind flashed to Amara's laughter, to the villagers' whispers, to the way some looked at her like she had been lowered in value. Then she thought of Kofi sitting up at night, placing water beside her without demanding gratitude. She thought of his patience, his steady calm, and suddenly the shame she had carried began to shift, like a heavy stone being moved off her chest. A rustle came from behind the tall grasses. Amina stiffened. Kofi's eyes sharpened, not with fear, but with awareness. Then Adem stepped out. His face was tight, his eyes wide, his breath uneven, like a man who had been running after something he couldn't afford to lose. He looked from the open locket to Kofi, then to Amina's wrist, and his mouth fell open. "You," Adem growled, "you tricked us." Kofi closed the locket slowly and slipped it back into his shirt. "No," he said calmly. "You revealed yourselves without being forced." Adem's hands clenched. "All this time, acting poor, while my brother's daughter—" Amina's voice cut through, steady and cold. "While you waited for her land," she corrected. Adem froze. The narrator notes the moment with sharp clarity, the greedy hate being named more than they hate being caught. Kofi's gaze remained calm. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will see what is real. The goods will arrive, and the truth will stand where rumors once stood." Adem swallowed, his confidence cracking like dry clay. He had followed them, thinking he would find weakness. Instead, he had found a truth too strong to bend. Amina stepped closer to Kofi, her eyes shining. "I didn't choose you," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "But you chose to be good." Kofi reached for her hand, open, gentle, certain, and as they turned back toward the village, Adem stood alone in the fading light, watching his plan collapse without anyone lifting a weapon against him. Because sometimes the sharpest justice comes simply from truth arriving on time. As you reach the end of this story, receive this prayer with an open heart. May every forced season you survived become the foundation of your freedom. May every plan designed to trap you be exposed by truth at the right time. Where people tried to use tradition to silence your voice, may God give you courage that cannot be intimidated. May the tears you hid at the clay wall be turned into strength that steadies your hands and clears your mind. May every greedy eye watching your life be disappointed, and may every dishonest mouth speaking against you fall quiet in shame. May God surround you with helpers like Zuri, loyal hearts who warn you in love and stand with you in storms. May your home be filled with peace that no rumor can steal. May your work be blessed, and may dignity return to you in full measure, even where you were mocked. May you never be forced to accept humiliation just to survive. May your boundaries be respected. May your future be protected from bitterness, and may your heart stay soft without becoming weak. May what you lost be restored in a better form, at a better time, with a better covering. And as you rise, may you rise without revenge. May your life speak for you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.